I'm Sam Baker, founder of The Pool and self-confessed Brontë fanatic. To celebrate the 200th anniversary of Emily Bronte's birth, we've come to her family home in Haworth to see how her home and the surrounding landscape shaped the person she was. So this is the room that Emily slept in particularly in the later part of her life. It's 6:30 in the morning now, but she would have been up and cooking breakfast a long time ago. Emily lived in this house from the time she was 2 years old, apart from about 18 months away where she was teaching, and also a year in Brussels. This is the room that she saw every day of her life. It was the nursery when she was a child, went on to be her room when she was older and writing. Emily was an obsessive writer from a very young age. As a child, her and Charlotte used to perform what they called bed plays in, if not this room, in this area. And bed plays were what they said. By Charlotte's definition, they were lovely plays. From the age of 16, 17, 18, Emily and Anne had an imaginary world called Gondal, which was kind of female dominated. And they carried on recreating that world until Emily was about 27, 28 years old. So she spent for most of her, well, all of her life, she was looking out at the churchyard where most of her family were buried, her mum and her elder sisters. The impact that must have had on her must have been huge. I mean, the main thing about this room is just how tiny everything is. It's like being transported to Lilliput. This is the stool that she took out on the moors to write. You would not get my bum on this stool. I'm a bit mind blown by being in this room and looking at this view and seeing what she would have seen. My brain is exploding. This is the Bronte's kitchen, more or less as it would have been. Their mother had died of cancer when Emily was 3 years old. And so Tabby, the housekeeper, had become a really motherly figure for the children. They used to spend a huge amount of time with her in here. So we have this image of the Brontes, I think is a bit, I don't know, staid? I don't know where that image comes from, but it's definitely there. But one of the things that came out of their childhood is they really, really loved to play. And there's a brilliant anecdote about Tabby, the housekeeper, having so much trouble with them one day that she ran down to the village screaming and yelling for help because she thought the children were being so rowdy and so naughty that she thought that they were going mad and she didn't know what to do about it. Emily in particular used to spend a huge amount of time in the kitchen, and that was really because when she came back from Brussels in 1842, she took on the role of housekeeper. Her aunt, who had moved in when her mother died, had died at that point. And it doesn't really fit with Emily's image as this kind of like the wild, passionate writer of Wuthering Heights. But you know, she loved the domestic, she loved the chores, the routine. But that was because her inner life was so wild, and she was imagining, you know, her imaginary life could go on while she was ironing and cooking and cleaning. One of the things that not many people know about Emily, and I certainly didn't know, was that one thing she did was she learnt German, and this is not her actual German vocabulary book, but so while she was working in the kitchen, cooking and preparing, she would be expanding her German vocabulary, which is a bit mad, really. So this is Branwell Bronte's room. Unlike the other rooms in the house, this is a set design from Sally Wainwright's To Walk Invisible, which is completely brilliant if you haven't seen it. So it's exactly how we think it would have been when Branwell lived in it. It's a bomb site. I just say it is a bomb site. We're particularly loving the spill down here because Branwell was, in his later years, as everybody knows, an enormous drinker. I'm going to be really naughty and touch this. So you can really imagine him sitting at this desk in a kind of a fervour of whatever he was on at that point, and drawing this picture of death taking himself, which is so melodramatic. So Emily, actually, and I don't know whether you can see here, but he's drawn himself as this muscular Adonis. He looks almost like a god, and he didn't look like that. He did not look like that in any way, shape, or form, and nobody would have done that point unless you were a farm labourer. Emily and Bramwell were believed to be particularly close. And whether that's because Emily was here more, and so she was more exposed to Bramwell on a day-to-day basis and arguably cleared up his mess more than the others, but also she wasn't scared of him in the same way as her two sisters were a little bit. From a very early age, Emily was really no nonsense about Bramwell. There's an amazing anecdote about how when she was really young, like maybe 6 years old, her father put a mask on her and then asked what they should do with Bramwell, and she said, well, we should reason with him, and if he won't be reasoned with, we should whip him. It just struck me as very Emily. Say Emily wasn't a big socialiser, but is the understatement of the year. She lived a really insular life. She couldn't really be asked, I think, to play nice. There's an amazing quote from Mary Taylor who says, "Imagine Emily taking wine or turning over prints with any stupid fop and preserving her temper and politeness." I mean, she's really my kind of girl, Emily. But her life was in her head, and that was what she was interested in. She wasn't really interested in anyone else. So this is the room where it all happened, where Charlotte wrote Jane Eyre and Anne wrote The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, and crucially Emily wrote Wuthering Heights. And the feeling is, I don't know, it's really shivery. I mean, the whole house is, but this room in particular. And here on the table, I don't know if you can see, somebody has carved an E. Now, we don't know it's Emily, but it feels to me like it's the kind of thing Emily would have done. A little bit rebellious. This writing desk used to belong to Anne, and it's where she wrote Tenant of Wildfell Hall. All of the sisters had these desks. Emily's would have been over there. It's not here. It's upstairs in a case where under lock and key, and looks exactly as it would have done when she left it just before she died. But the idea that Anne sat here and Emily sat there and Charlotte sat there, we imagine, writing these books that have meant so much to so many people, it's mind-blowing. Luckily they had the vocabulary, I don't. These are some fragments of Emily's poetry. Her writing is absolutely minute and on both sides. It's just incredible and impossible to read, even if I did have my glasses, which I don't. Emily was initially incredibly private about her poetry, and in fact all of her writing. Charlotte discovered her notebook with her poetry in and teamed up with Anne to try to get it published. Emily went nuts. She had a massive go at Charlotte and then had a massive sulk, that's my Emily. Eventually Charlotte did persuade, bully, convince her to have her poems published. The poems were published under a pseudonym in 1846. The sisters were paid £36, which was a princely sum at that time, and they sold precisely 2 copies. We're out in the moors at Penistone Hill, where Emily spent a huge amount of time throughout her lifetime, but particularly when she was writing Wuthering Heights. Emily, Charlotte and Anne used to do a huge amount of walking. We're not far from what's known now as the Brontë waterfalls, where they used to walk most days. There's a brilliant anecdote about Emily and Charlotte and Bramwell doing a massive walk, which would have been about a 20-mile round trip. And Charlotte, not being quite as hardcore as the others, got a carriage back, which is it's pathetic, frankly, pathetic. This is really the landscape of Wuthering Heights. Like I said, Penistone Hill features heavily in the book. Over in the distance there is Top Withens. Top Withens is believed to be the venue for Wuthering Heights. The house doesn't look like the Wuthering Heights looked, but that remoteness and the distance from anywhere really captures the kind of remote spirit of Wuthering Heights. Emily died only 1 year after the publication of Wuthering Heights. Her novel had received mixed reviews when it was published, and only became a classic after her death. It seems sad and strange that this wild, insular woman from Yorkshire never saw the impact her writing had on the world, or realised that the characters and places she created would still be adored 200 years later.